I was thinking with the we can do for the next few lessons, we're going to progress from simple shapes, simple items to more complicated paintings with the coffee thing. Since not all of you have paints at home, but most of you do have pencils and erasers, and I'm assuming most of you have coffee at home. If you don't, you can use tea as well. We're gonna do this now. If you don't have brushes at home, use earbuds and cotton balls and the pieces of sponge that you cut up. Anything you can think of, experiment with those. Alright, so today we're going to do the first shape we're going to do. The first item is gonna be an apple, a simple apple. So we're first gonna draw it. Look very carefully, the apple isn't exactly round. Alright. Follow the exact curve of the apple as far as possible. This will always also be an exercise in that very important how to see like an artist, because if you don't know how to look and observe properly, you will have trouble drawing more complicated pictures and painting more complicated pictures like faces or very complicated still lifes or things like that. Okay, I'm going to fast forward quickly while I finish making the underdrawing. Alright, so there we have the underdrawing now. Very basic, it's a very simple shape. And so now we have our three main strengths of coffee. And a little pot with clean water. We have our lightest value. We have our mid-tone. And our darkest coffee. There you go. Alrighty. So let's get into it. I've got two sizes of brushes here. I can't really see. The one looks like an 11 and the other one like an 8. So two brushes. If you have brushes at home, you can use those. Watercolor paper will work best, but if you don't have that at home, normal printer paper will be fine. It may look a little different from mine, but that's okay. And if you have to paint with earbuds or cotton wool, it will look differently from mine, but it's still manageable, it's still doable, okay? So don't worry if it doesn't look exactly like mine. You don't all have the tools at home. Okay, so let's start. So I'm going to start with my bigger brush, and I'm gonna lay down first just a general, the lightest mixture of coffee, just a general layer of the coffee. And remember to leave the highlight open. Don't paint over the highlight. I left my lines dark so that you guys can see them. So that it's easier for you. So I'm first going to do this very light coffee layer. If you want it even lighter than this, you can just add more water. You can do this wet on wet or wet on dry. I'm painting wet on dry now, which is actually prone to making watermarks. Wet on wet will be fine as well. For those of you who haven't done watercolor painting before, when we talk of wet on wet, you wet the paper in the areas that you want to paint. You wet the paper first with clean water, and then you paint into that before the clean water layer dries. Let me show you what happens when you do that. I'll do this here on the side. So you first paint a layer of clean water, and then you add your paint. So that happens, it bleeds like that, see? And don't wet the entire page. Wet only the areas you want to paint, because otherwise it's going to bleed everywhere. It's going to go over your edges. Alright, so only the parts that you want to paint, and this is only for the underpainting. I'm not quite sure, we can try it, but I'm not quite sure how it will work over an already painted layer. Let's try it here. Oh no, it should work fine. It doesn't lift off any of the coffee that I've already painted. See, it bleeds like that. And on watercolor paper, you can then push the paint around like I'm doing now. On printer paper and other paper, that might not be possible. Normally other papers like printer paper will soak up the paint immediately, so you won't have a little puddle like this to push around. Okay, now the secret is to work fast, so I'm going to fast forward again. I'm going to work layer upon layer, building the highlights and the shadows. Alright. while the rest, those two spots, dry completely, I'm gonna continue. In the meantime, I have mixed a still darker color. Let's check it against this one. Not that darker, actually. Let's make it even darker. Because I want a really dark color now. Okay, let's check. Doesn't really work. Okay. Alright, while those two spots still dry, the last bit, I'm gonna continue in the parts that's already completely dry. Let me just get the picture again. Alrighty. So here I need it to be a bit darker. Yes, and here I'm basically just doing a few finishing touches now. Sorry. Okay, now for the stem to stand out, I'm going to need to make that part lighter. So I'm taking clean water on my brush, reactivating that bit there, and you'll see some of it already comes off with the brushing. And if I want to make it even more darker or lighter, I'm using the paper towel to lift off some more. That looks better. Right, I'm going to work on this. I think that shadow bit there is fine now. I can work a little bit on there. I'm going to use the medium strength coffee just for a few finishing touches right there, because it kind of looks weird with that very dark stripe there. Let's add a little bit here as well. Okay, I think the rest looks good. I can work a little bit on this shadowy area as well. Okay, so it stands out a bit more. And while I'm here, there seems to be a tiny bit of shadow missing. From there. Okay. That looks good for now. I'm going to work a little bit more on this part here. Now I have to start testing the paint. Just to round it off a bit, that it doesn't look like a child's coloring drawing. When I'm testing, I'm also testing for how much paint I have on my brush, because at this stage I'm adding details and finishing touches, so I don't want my brush to be completely loaded with the coffee paint. I actually want less paint on my brush now. That looks a lot better. Alright, now here I'm basically covering parts that looks almost like subtle highlights now, so that the actual highlighted bits can stand out. Now you will notice that around this white highlight there is a part here and a little stripe up to there that is lighter. That's actually part of the highlight, so I want that to stand out more, so that's why I'm trying to very carefully cover the rest that wants to look like highlights, but actually isn't highlights. You can see my brush is pretty dry by now, so I can blend easier. Cool. Where next? I think I'm going to continue down here. You'll see that I'm painting a lot more careful now than I did before, because before I was basically just blocking in areas, where now I'm actually adding the finer details. And with the finer details, I don't mean fine stripes or lines or whatever. I mean I'm basically fine-tuning the shadow parts and the highlighted parts. That's what I mean by fine-tuning. Right, oopsie. Here on the underside of the apple, it's too wet. There, that's better. On here, there's very subtle shadow parts, because this is the underside where the light doesn't go. It's not as dark as these shadow parts, it's much more subtle. But if they are not added, the apple won't look round. Remember, with shadows and highlights, you are defining the three-dimensional shape of the apple. You don't want your apple to look flat. Remember, art is all about creating the illusion of three-dimensionality, right? So that's what I'm doing now. I'm working on that illusion. I'm gonna make it a little bit more dark here on the underside. And again, I don't want my brush to be too wet, for two reasons. One is, if my brush is too wet, I'm gonna pick up the layers that's underneath now, and it will be harder to control this edge. I've dried my brush now, and now I'm just softening this edge I'm having here. It sounds like we're gonna have some rain. That'll actually be fantastic. Alright, I did something weird there. Okay, I think that's basically it. I wanna try something. Here by the highlight, you can see the pencil line is still there. Let's see if I can erase it. This was the coffee paint. A little bit of it comes off. I should have lightened that line before I started painting. But you can see that some of the color around it does come off. So I think we might be able to erase some of the color like we do with watercolor paints. It doesn't exactly work as well. This coffee paint thing reminds me more of gorge paint actually. It's the consistency is a bit thicker. It's easier to manipulate and control, but it's more opaque as well. It's a weird combination between actual watercolor paint and gorge paint. It's weird, but I quite like it. I think I'm enjoying painting with coffee. Right, I'm gonna work on the cast shadow here at the bottom. Let's just quickly do that now for this part. My brush can be pretty wet, it's fine, because I need to spread the paint out a bit. Now the spreading out part is what I talked about in the beginning of the video. Almost the beginning, well, when I started painting, when I talked about the different types of paper. Actual proper expensive watercolor paper has almost like a plastic sheen on top of it. That helps that the paint doesn't soak into the paper immediately, so that you can manipulate it like this and push it around. This is something that the cheaper watercolor papers don't have. That's why for the classes, for the classroom, I buy the expensive stuff, because we need it to work properly. Otherwise you're gonna get frustrated for the things that you do with the watercolors in class. The cheaper watercolor papers I normally buy for the texture when we work with pastels and charcoal. The expensive stuff is for actual watercolor paintings. I think this is it. It actually doesn't look too bad. I'll just leave it to completely dry now. So I hope you enjoyed this one. We're gonna do a few other coffee paintings, since most of you don't have access to watercolor paints now. The coffee seems to be quite a nice substitute while we're in lockdown. So we're gonna do more, and I'm gonna make each project a little bit more complicated so that you grow as you learn this technique. We're not going to paint simple shapes like this in every lesson. I'm going to make it a little bit more complicated each time. Maybe add a little texture here and there or something. Yeah, but I think this is actually nice. I like this. Alright guys, see you in the next video. Bye.